the Instructor Podcast with Terry Cook, talking with leaders, innovators, experts and game changers about what drives them.
Welcome to the Instructor Podcast Green Room Edition. This is a show where we cover all the latest news and hot topics from within our driving instructor world. As always, I am your mediocre host, Terry Cook. I'm delighted to be here, but you'll be delighted it's not just me. I am joined by the Ayatollah of rock and roller, Chris Bensted. How are we doing, Chris?
I like that one. I'm good, thank you. Yes, yeah, I've had a weird day, but it's all good.
But for those listening who don't know, Chris is the co-founder of the Driving Instructor and Traders Collective, and he is here to bring us all the news. So no pressure later on, Chris, but you'd best have some good stories for us. But yeah, we've been away for a little while. I took June off. That was completely my decision. Needed a break, but we are back now. Chris, how does it feel? Are you glad to be back within the warm bosom of the Instructor Podcast?
I was quite enjoying it not being here until I met up with you the other day and suddenly realised how much I've missed it. So yes, yeah, I was kind of tied up, busy having a baby, so I had other things to do. But it was very nice to come back to what other people call normality. I'm not sure we'd use that description, but
First of all, congratulations on the baby.
Thank you.
Secondly, that pretty much sums up how people view me. They like me there, but they're always happy when I'm gone. But yes, we are back with the Green Room number 41. Later on, we are going to be bringing in some new features. So we're going to be talking about the events that are coming up. We've got some shout-outs and stuff like that to do. And we're going to be covering a topic that Chris has specifically requested that we cover. But before that, there has been some news over the last few months. So let's get stuck into that. And we're going to start off with I suppose we might say the biggest news, because you've got a new government. The Labour Party is now the party of power. And often with a new government comes change. So I'm going to ask you this, Chris. Realistically speaking, I realise we might be stretching it with that word, but realistically speaking, what would you like to see change? Is there one thing that you would like to see changed by this government that relates to us and what we do?
The attitude and the oversight towards the DVSA, that we have this can't do attitude because legislation gets in the way. We're not allowed to do that. Legislation would have to change, and we're not allowed to change legislation. I need another word. I can't do legislation today. Yes, we can. We can do it. It's the Disney approach, isn't it? Of if you could do it, what would it look like and how would you get there? Let's do that. Let's stop closing the door before we've even started. And if we could change that attitude, I think we'd really get some results. But no one wants to put their head above the parapet. Everybody's happy with the status quo when it comes to that approach. No one's happy with the situation at all. But it's, they're taking the steps to get there. I think there's an amazing resource of driving instructors who've got great ideas. And rather than saying can't do that because of legislation, maybe we should just take the other view and see where it takes us and have some groups put together to try and come up with something that, that might actually work.
I think this is where I have to be a little bit careful, because as I get more involved in the road safety community, like the safety sector, if you like, my bubble is changing slightly. So on one hand, I feel that like the number of people calling for this stuff is growing. But I also realise who I'm surrounded by. I'm surrounded by driving instructors, and I'm surrounded by the road safety sector. So is it just that little bubble I'm in? And I don't think it is. I do think there's a growing number of people, as you said, with good ideas, and a growing number of people that are wanting to get those ideas across and campaigning for those ideas. And I do think how can I phrase this? There is more chance of a change under this government than there was in the previous one. I'll phrase it that way. And the one I would say, because I've been thinking about this today, is I want to see that manifesto for road safety that was created by PAX, I think it was. I want to see that enforced, because the basic principles within that, which I'll run for a moment for anyone that isn't aware, they are basic principles. And to me, these seems relatively straightforward to employ it. And one thing I will say actually is what was great about that manifesto was seeing 3 names in particular that may have been added since, but there was the Instructor Podcast, ADI JC, and My Drive Time. All their logos were on there as supporters, and I just thought for those logos to be mixed in with some of the others on there, I just thought was really cool. But I'll run through these, Chris, and then you're welcome to share with me your thoughts before we move on. But the 4 key elements of that manifesto for road safety are to develop and commit to a national road safety strategy, to establish a road safety investigation branch, to introduce graduated driving licenses, and to adopt the latest, I'll say that again, to adopt the latest vehicle safety regulations. It's what I want to see implemented, that manifesto. I think most of those are just kind of key basic principles. Any thoughts, not anything you want to touch on there?
Well, it sounds like extremist madness, doesn't it? What in that is bad?
It's win pro-woke propaganda, Chris.
So it's all achievable. It all is supported by data, and it makes the world a better place. I don't quite get where the issue is. So I can hear the, we'd need to change legislation argument against it, but apart from that, I can't see anything else. It would change the environment, wouldn't it? Change the approach to things, and possibly you could put those values into everything else. So if you took the approach of not doing something that's going to be negative to other people inside of the decisions, then when you bring that in, that ethos would start being considered when they make other changes and other choices. So I absolutely, I think it would be really interesting to see what happens. I'm not going to hold my breath.
Well, just I think what you said there about freeing up legislation a little bit and freeing up the DVSA to work. Imagine where the testing will be in a year's time. If they had more freedom to actually implement some of the stuff that, let's be honest, we know they want to implement but can't. Mm-hmm. And then you look at the other side and think, okay, so there's 5 people a day die on UK roads, and there's 80 people a day that are seriously harmed. And I think that number's often forgotten. 80 people a day is seriously injured on UK roads. And imagine where those numbers have been a year if these 2 things were implemented. But unfortunately, all we can do is campaign for it in the hope that a new government decides to prioritize or attribute road death equality with other types of death, which is nowhere near as prominent. But either way, let's move on, because I don't want to dwell on politics too long, because I got told off recently for mentioning that in my Instructor Podcast group. I said a sentence, but either way, let's move on, because I want to give a little shout out to the IMTD Awards. Chris, what does IMTD stand for?
Institution of Master Tutors of Driving.
Good. I'm glad you said that, because I wrote it down and I won't know. But first of all, I want to make an public apology to IMTD, because a couple of years ago they invited me down. I recorded the sessions down there, really good sessions, put it out as a podcast episode. Been invited down since, haven't gone. Not to join, but to submit to join with it, right? Yes, and all that kind of stuff. Haven't done it. Really slack, priorities, all that kind of stuff. But I feel like I'm messing about a little bit. So I know a few of the members there listen, and Kathy Higgins I know listens, and I love Kathy Higgins. She's lovely. So, big apologies. Big apologies to those guys. But I wanted to mention their awards, because they did have their awards recently, and they released 6. So I'm going to give a shout out to the 6 winners of their awards. I'm going to do it in a way that will potentially get me in trouble, but either way, let's have some fun with it. So first off, friend of the show and friend of mine, Stuart Lockray, received an award for the work he's done with Bright Coaching. Friends of the show and friends of mine, Kev Tracey Field, received an award for the work they've done with Confident Drivers. Friend of the show and acquaintance of mine, Ollie Taylor, got an award for the work he did with Honest Truth. Alan Hiscox of the British Horse Society took an award. friend of mine. No, let me get the right. Friend of the show and mate of mine, Dr. Elizabeth Box, also the one who's literally took food out of her mouth recently, got an award for the work she's done with Dry Fit. And Mike Hillman's also got an award. So those 6 people all took awards. Any thoughts on those, Chris?
All awesome people. I've had the pleasure of having spoken to all of them. And yeah, I think there should be more of a tie-up with what we do and things like the British Horse Society stuff. I know how akin to the industry Alan is, and you know, he's always wanted more. And he puts the effort in. He turns up at the conferences, and you know, he genuinely sees things the same way. So you know, I think when we tie up with things like that, so often the names are driving instructors from in the industry, which is great because instructors do great work. It's nice to also connect outside, and that's the thing that the IMTD's always been better at than anybody else in the industry, because they are a powerhouse of names in that room. You know, I was a member. I'm only not a member because I couldn't commit. It just, life was against me going along and everything else. If it wasn't for that, I'd still be a member. Amazing speakers. They are. I always, just slightly tongue in cheek, referred to them as the funny handshake club of the industry, because you've got to write a dissertation to join, and it's almost got that kind of Mason's feel to things, in the way that it's quite formal from that perspective. But actually, they're a lovely bunch. All of them are lovely. There's amazing resources to be had. If you haven't checked them out, check them out. They're great. I still, even though I'm not currently a member, never know, they might have me back one day. But I fully support everything they do. And I've got a lovely certificate on the shelf from when I got an award for the COVID work that I did, which was lovely of them to recognise that. So they are close to my heart.
I second everything you've said there. I know that I felt slightly out of place down there because I'm not the most formal of people. I have been known to greet people with the phrase, "All right, Cocker."
I turned up in a twister suit for the Big Learner Relay. The look on people's faces, that's not the... I don't mind. It was for charity. It's all good. But yeah, no, there is a slight air of formality. But do you know what? Actually, that, you know, it's an air of respect that possibly we need in more driving instructor rooms. Maybe there's a balance we can find. But yeah.
Anyway, I think we're getting slightly off topic. Yeah, big congratulations to those guys that won the IMTD awards. 5 of those 6 have been on the podcast in one form or another, so that's quite cool. But yeah, big shouts to those guys, experts in their field, which may or may not tie into what we're talking about later. Hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But something that is right up your street, Chris, is the latest results that have come out from the Part 1 scores. So they released the data for the 2003 pass rate for Part 1, and it's the lowest since 2007. And the pass rate in 2023 currently sits at 37.8%. So that's a 37.8% pass rate in 2023 for the Part 1. So add a tiny bit of context where it comes to you. The normal theory test sits at 45% for 23 to 24. That's the latest data available on the government website. Check that today. And that has also been declining steadily, much like the Part 1 over the last few years. It's been in steady decline, apart from a blip where it jumped up during COVID. So both of those are heavily declining. It wasn't that long ago the theory test was in the 60s, the high 60% pass rate, and now it's at 45. But specifically the Part 1, I suppose, Chris, what's going on? 37.8% pass rate.
I think there's a lot of things. It's on my agenda to chat with the DVSA about, because I'm really interested in what they think the issue is. I think questions have got harder. Genuinely think that there's been a move on the L test on all of the theories. There has been a move towards questions where there's not a rubbish answer, where you can't just go safe answer and things like that. It's great. It's keeping me in a job as a theory trainer. But I would like to kind of solve the problem. I think that there's a change in the people coming through into the industry, and we've seen it before. If you look at the waves of pass rate going up and down, there is no qualification process to becoming a driving instructor. To be being entered onto the register, to start that process, all you need is a driving license and not to have been nicked for something. That doesn't mean you haven't done it. It means you haven't been caught yet. So that's the qualification process. And I think the people coming through to look at it, there's a dynamic change there. And the move towards coaching has actually, I think, been a massive issue. People still aren't reading the books, but the move towards coaching, there's an encouragement to not know your stuff because you can just ask questions. And I think sometimes that leaves people away from being challenged in their own knowledge. So if you get challenged in your own knowledge as things go through, then that can help you learn and help you develop and improve. So yeah, I think that's some of those things that are happening, and it's all kind of happening together. And there's even less support for part one than there's ever been going on from the channels that are coming through. People they're not finding the information that they need from their chosen provider for the training. I think even when people went out and did it on their own, of the pass to part one and then go and find someone, they actually then they found a system, they found a way of doing so. And yeah, that's changed. So now they believe it's part of what they've bought into and they're not given it. So I think that's happening as well. So there's so many facets to it. It's definitely interesting, and I hope it means that something changes.
I wonder if the two are interlinked a little bit. The difficulty of the questions, because I think it's getting harder. I've seen that recently in the 5-minute fair I've started doing, and the season I've started is initially focusing on towing. And like you said, a lot of those towing questions, you could probably pick 2 or 3 of the answers thinking they're the correct ones. There isn't a stupid one there. They're just like, oh, I don't know this. And it's more challenging. And that's just from the L test. And I wonder if there's that link between them getting harder and therefore other people not offering training on that subject. Potentially because it's getting harder and they don't know the answer. But before we get into that, I want to ask you the specific question, because you said something there that I hear a lot of people say, but never, or shouldn't say never, rarely clarify. The books. We should be reading the books.
Which books? So the DVSA recommended reading list. It's not recommended. It's essential. You can do it without, but why would you want to? It's the stuff that we need. Starts at the top with the highway code, driving essential skills, and know your traffic signs. Highway code and know your traffic signs are available online for free. So, there's not even an investment in those. The driving essential skills is arguably the Bible of learning to drive, whether you like it or not. I'm not a fan, but it does that. Then you've got the instructor books, and the instructor books are the driving instructor handbook and practical skills for practical skills for driver trainers. I think is the correct title. I've got it sat next to me, so I should be able to see it and check. No, it's the only one I can't see. But yeah, practical skills for driving instructors or similar. I just can't quite remember the name. I think that's the full list of those. There's a little bit of an issue with regards to the instructor handbook because sadly, John died and hasn't updated it because of that. So they're trying to figure out what to do next. Watch this space. We'll see what happens. And some of the information in there, particularly because of the H1 rule changes for priority and such, it's not accurate. It's not correct. So there's a little bit of an issue there. So it's just something to be aware of. But the book is still very valuable. So it's doing that. and because of every opportunity I get, I mention it. It took me 18 months to find out when I was asking for an audio version. If you buy the Kindle version, the digital version of the books, you can play it through the Kindle app on any device, and it will read them out. The exception being the instructor's handbook. So you can have it if you're not a read off the page person like myself. You can have it read to you, through that kind of device, or there's other things that will read it as well. So yeah, you haven't got to read. There's other ways of doing so, or engage in some of the awesome trainers in the industry that will help you by delivering information through workshops and Zoom sessions and whatever else.
The Highway Code, the latest version of the Highway Code is available on Audible as well, which is pretty cool.
Is that official?
Yes.
The official version?
I'm 99% sure. Now you've got me doubting myself. Let me have a quick check. But while I'm checking this, Chris, who would be the best trainer to look for if you wanted help with the part one?
I hate doing shameless plugs for myself, but I like to think I'm probably the best informed for theory across the board. So if you want somewhere to start, come and get in touch with me. If what I do doesn't suit you, I will probably be able to point you in the direction of what you need for you. So, it's my split hat between me having, a theory training company and the DITC, the signposting platform for the industry. But I think I'm kind of a good place to start. Everyone else thinks so. It's very kind of them to recommend me. So,
well, you know that I recommend you, and to all my learners as well. So, the Highway Code is the official Highway Code, but not read by the DVSA or someone from that. It's literally a copy of the Highway Code read by someone else.
Okay.
So, yes, but that's available on Audible. But as you said, you can get the upstate versions, some more upstate versions and stuff, and play it through Kindle. But I want to tie back to the thing I mentioned earlier, which is wondering if there is a potential link between it getting harder and then trainers then not wanting to do it even less, because we know there was that barrier anyway of training companies avoiding it.
I think we see it with the learners. There's a lot of instructors that are worried about delivering theory training. And you kind of think, well, that's what you do out on the road. Actually, I had a really good conversation with it was a couple of my instructors, and we were just chatting about was it one of the instructors asked about how you teach national speed limit, and that issue that often the DVSA portray, they want you to go faster. That danger of failing for not going fast enough. And then almost us going against the learner candidate making a good decision. If they feel it should be 40 and we go, well, no, you need to go faster, it goes against road safety potentially on an empty country road with no one else around you. And we're having that conversation, which I always think is really interesting. And I was taking kind of a theory type approach with it and looking at the rules and that side of things. And then my colleague was looking at, if you were in the car with someone, asking some really lovely questions about, well, what would you do? How do you think? What can you see? What are the variables? And we were both approaching the same point, but from opposite directions. And it was a lovely example of where theory and practical kind of meet. That theory is about the black and white hard fact, and then the practical is about those variables. And there is a difference. And I think, I knew that because I was out doing the road stuff, and then I've moved towards theory, and, some of it was been a surprise to me. But that difference was really sort of contrasting, and I could understand why some instructors aren't keen on going down that side of things. So I think the same's probably true when it comes to the part one stuff. And for me, although we're told there's this list of books, where's the syllabus? How do we know what from those books is there? in anything else, you wouldn't just chuck that at someone and say, right, I'm going to test you on all of that. We'd have structure. So maybe syllabus isn't the right phrase. Maybe its structure is what would be better. The L test is split into 14/15 categories. So that makes it easier to break down. I still don't think they're very good as categories. It doesn't make sense. People always seem to get road signs come up, and it's not about road signs. It's about the rules connected to the road signs. Maybe parking. When can you, when can't you? It's not the sign itself. So when you look at the part 1, 4 bands, there's no breakdown. It's really hard to know where someone's struggling, and be able to break that into pieces and teach, which is what we need to do. So I think that's an element of it that, is probably causing an issue. The more important it gets, and if the pass rate is going down, it's getting more important to be able to go, here, I can help you. We're still stuck in we'll just keep attempting it and failing it, and eventually you'll get there. It's not what we want. So I think a better way of breaking things down, this is what I'm going to have a chat with the DVSA this week about, what is in there? How does it work from your side of things? Whether they'll tell me or not, I don't know, but at least I've got the opportunity to ask the question.
How much is this, let's be honest, abysmal pass rate helping the DVSA right now?
If you can't have a queue forming because no one's getting through the front door, that's probably a good thing, isn't it? When you haven't got any examiners, you've got a long waiting list. Creating a bottleneck. It's one of the things that is on the theory test of when there's traffic bunching happening on the motorway. What do? You bring in variable speed limits. And you use it to regulate the density of traffic. Effectively, that's what the test process is doing. If we're having an obstruction to entry, delayed DBS checks, conspiracists might say that that's deliberate as well. I don't know. Not suggesting it is, just mentioning it. Then with the part 1 as well, is there an appetite to increase it because we get more people coming through? I'm not that bothered about the pass rate being low, because maybe it shows a good standard is required. So maybe what we need to do is make it more difficult. I don't think necessarily if learning to drive, if being able to drive, having a license is almost a right as long as you reach the standard. Well, then all instructors should be aiming for 100% pass rate, and that sort of makes sense. We don't want that when it comes. We want the best of the best coming into the industry. But what is that? And I don't think I'm someone to make that judgment, because what I think is a really good instructor will be totally different to what someone else does. And horses for courses, lots of different ways to approach it. So I think that maybe it's not a problem. I don't think that's true, because I think the test isn't brilliant and we could do a lot to improve it. But the pass rate might be the wrong metric to be hanging our hat on.
Do you think introducing, oh God, I'm going to get shouted at by listeners. Do you think introducing a mandatory, every 3 or 4 years theory test for instructors that ties in almost with a standards check would be beneficial?
You mean the Terry Cook model? We'll name it that, and then you can get all of the abuse.
Let's add it to the list. There is great ideas.
But my preference, if I had control over standards check, would be a 4-year cycle of theory first year, practical second year, instructional, what we've got at the moment, third year, and the 4th year, open CPD. Do what you like, but you've got to prove you've done it.
The reason I'm kind of suggesting specifically with the theory, though, is because that will take minimal effort from people. So obviously, if you have that part 2, essentially, you're driving, and then you have the instructional, that takes examiners. But to create an online version where you have to go in, and all right, there's ways to blag it and stuff like that, but it's still going to make people think, it's still going to make people do it. Surely that's just an extra thing that we can chuck at ADIs, because I look at me and all right, I do the 5-minute theory and I'm a bit more invested than most, but there's still stuff that catches me out because I'm not doing that element of it day to day. It's like one of the things you talk about a lot is that since becoming this theory trainer, your approach has changed a little bit. And as a driving instructor, I can't change my approach to that of a theory trainer because I'm a driving instructor. You can switch a little bit, but I can't go all one or the other. So I think that's where I'm coming from. It's easier to do that in the people capacity.
Yeah, so I don't agree because we could use DIA examiners, diamond examiners, to do the part 2 stuff. We are in an industry of commercial driver trainers. So what we could do is do with what we should do with audit, and then all these things join together, make audit compulsory for trainers, have a decent standard for audit, and then they could do the assessments on driving and sign the certificate. It's not a license, so we don't need that. So we don't need more examiners necessarily. We could keep that in place. We could have, as you're saying, with the part 1, and then that regulation of CPD could be done through any. It doesn't have to be one of ours. It could be a CPD, commercial CPD body that already exists. We're so insular that we think that firstly it's got to come from the DVSA, otherwise it doesn't happen. And secondly, that if it's not a driving instructor at the wheel, then it's not good enough for us. And there's plenty of stuff out there that we can repurpose for doing so.
I think what I'm trying to get across, maybe I'm not making the point very well, is I'll go back to what I said about the government thing. Realistically, so by asking them to do what you've said, which by the way I like the idea, we're asking them to potentially do 3 or 4 things. We're asking them to, do the practical driving aspect, and whether we use DIA or Diamond or whatever, we're asking them to do that. And I'm just thinking, like, sensibly, let's ask them to do the easiest thing first.
Yeah, no, and the thing from my perspective is, I don't think that there's necessarily more work in changing legislation on that level, because you've got to change the legislation. So the process is the same. The amount of time it's going to take, we'll get one bite of the cherry. So I would approach it from the other side and say, well, no, actually, let's go in with the best model we can do, rather than what's always happened, little changes. We're at a point where everything is in such a wreck that it needs to be rebuilt from the ground up, I would suggest. So I 100% get what you're saying. And yes, that is an approach. It's the approach that we've always taken of going, right, this is what we've already got. How do we change what we've already got? I think it's broken, and I would much rather have a replacement, a new system that acknowledges the problems and then comes up with an all-round solution, which, as I say, doesn't have to be costly at all. There's plenty of ways that you can make things self-funding. We're businesses. Let's treat us like businesses. I think that's where we go wrong a lot of the time, is we end up being service providers and not a business. If it was going to cost you 500 quid more a year to be a driving instructor, it's not a lot of money. If we're going to add that in there, I get the reservations, but actually, if we're going to up the standard and therefore potentially up people's incomes because of the professionalism and everything else, and have safer roads at the end of it, I don't think it is that big an ordeal. And I think you get one bite of the cherry. I don't think that, I don't think softly is necessarily. I think that's what we've tried. So maybe we should try.
Me getting depressed. I think it's because I agree with you completely, actually, with everything you've said, which is kind of annoying, but whatever. But it's like, I want an overhaul of so much of this stuff. It's like, put me in charge, just give me, free rein, and I'll just tear stuff up and start again. But I think this is where I'm losing a bit of faith. It's like, yeah, that's not going to happen. Like, I even go back to what I said at the start. When I ask you those questions, how often do I say realistically? It's like, what do you want? But it's like, I think maybe that's where I'm becoming a bit demoralized. But I want to kind of wrap up on this, but I want to finish with a question that I don't think get asked often. Because I think the question that usually would be asked of you here is, what would you say to PDIs or ADIs that want to look at getting better at the theory aspect of it? And we hear that advice a lot. And if I'm being honest, I think it's relatively self-explanatory, and that's not meant to be offensive to anyone. I'm going to ask you the question: what would you suggest to trainers listening now? So someone that's got a PDI, or people inquiring or training PDIs, or that kind of stuff. What are you going to suggest to them? Because I think that's where the bigger problem lies.
I think it's a really good question. I'd much rather answer the other one. But no, it is. It's a really good question. And I think you need to go back to the clean slate. Remember, it's the first step as people come in. And it might be that we stop doing it as the first step and go and look at their driving first. So actually go out and work on part 2 stuff as it stands before working on the part 1, and see how you can bring in the basic fundamental principles of the theory of what you're doing with that person in the way that you're looking at their driving and you're breaking things down. And if you can't do that, then look at yourself and see how you can improve yourself to do it. And it might be sitting the theory test. I would like to have that available, and it's on my list of requests, is to have there isn't a very good test yourself approach for the part 1. There's the revision questions, but it'd be nice if there was one for trainers that was a little bit more focused on on what you're doing with it could be voluntary. It touches on the whole audit thing again. I don't know. I say audit. I don't care whether it's audit or not. I just think something that recognizes what a trainer is. Because in the same way that you said earlier, and I didn't really answer it because I went off on a different tangent. No surprise. But the same way that you said earlier about the difference that I've discovered, and it is fascinating, and I love it, and I really criticize myself about it, between me being a practical trainer and then moving into theory and going, hang on a minute, this is something totally different that I wouldn't have seen elsewhere. The same thing is true when it comes to being a trainer. And I think that's one of the problems, is that you get people just deciding one day that they're going to be a trainer, and there's no structure and process there in place, and we're very reliant on that. So I think create your scheme and make it someone coming in absolutely devoid of any information about being a driving instructor and what the process is. Are you teaching them that stuff, or are you saying go away and work it out, potentially via revise what you haven't learned yet? And if so, change it. Do a Zoom session with all of your PDIs. Open it up to PDIs that aren't yours. What an awesome way to get more work coming in. Start focusing on those kind of approaches, and see if you can build some of that knowledge and understanding into that process. That's what I'm doing.
Maybe it's something I could look into. I don't know, but I like that answer. Or I'm giving you too many compliments today. What I will say is that I heard a podcast recently, and they were sort of advice on how to build up creativity. And one of the ways they do it is like a little game that you play where you just look around your room and you point at different objects. And as you point them, you just say what the object is, so like TV, sofa, whatever. Then you do it again, but you say the object after. So, for example, you'd point at the sofa, then you'd point at the TV and say sofa. Then you'd point at the table and say TV. Then you do it again, but this time you have to think of a completely different item when you're pointing at that item. And I thought, that's how you answer my questions. Sometimes you answer, sometimes you ask the one before, and sometimes you just go, that's about a unicorn, I'm going to go there.
As I've said many times, it's my brain is a lovely place to visit, but you don't want to live there, because that's how it works.
We'll just clarify, I wouldn't have it any other way. But let's move on. I don't want to dwell on that any longer. And I not liked that answer you gave there about what trains can be doing. And I think more, if we shorten it. But the last piece of news I want to touch on, unless you've got anything to add, is quite simply that waiting times are still strict.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Any other news we want to comment on, Chris? Because we'll come back to that properly over time, I think.
No, I think, we're in a bit of a period of waiting now, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
Really. Feet have got to hit the floor. People have got to catch up. Like any move into a new job. And we've just got to kind of wait and see what happens. I hope we don't suffer too much while we wait.
And look, the DVSA are now out of their period of isolation. They can talk again. So I know you've got your meeting planned, and I'm reaching out to get them on the show and stuff like that. So we'll see what happens. But we are like 40 minutes into the show, so let's take a moment to introduce ourselves. Chris, do you want to tell everyone who you are, what you have to offer, and why you're so wonderful?
I love the fact that you think I am, so thank you. I have missed you, So I am Chris Bensted, and I am co-founder of the DITC, the Driving Instructor and Trainers Collective, signposting platform for the industry, trying to help join the dots between people that are coming into the industry or have been in the industry for a while, and other people like Terry, who have an awesome product that they need to connect and people can't always find. However loud we shout, it's a strange industry. There's a lack of connectivity. We're trying to join the dots. I'm also, as mentioned, a theory specialist. I gave up my car to spend my day on Zoom, staring at a screen and talking to myself. So that's my part in the industry when I'm not being asked random questions and opinions. And opinions are an illusion, I was told yesterday, which I thought was kind of cool.
Let's save that for like a green room extra or something like that. That's a whole different topic. But do you know what? Before we go any further with that, I want to touch back on what you said there about joining the dots, because I find this idea really interesting. Because forget who this conversation was with the other day. It may have been someone, one of my lovely premium members that are currently watching along now. But they said that they reckon I'm known by most people in the industry. I did some maths, and I reckon I'm known by about 12%. At the most.
Yeah.
What figure would you say that is for you, Chris? I know this is guesswork, but out of curiosity, because I think it's deceptive sometimes.
It's a lot less than it used to be. And I don't know what if I was trying to be seen by more people, which I suppose with the theory stuff I'm trying to connect with as many instructors as possible. I'm not quite sure how I can do it more. The people that know me assume that everybody knows me. But it's definitely not the case. And I think actually it shows, be lovely to see a moving model of the industry of who the people are that are in it, and it's a very small percentage, but they're the names that you recognize because they're the ones that have been in it for that length of time. We don't see the in and outs that are happening at the entry end, and the people, particularly with large franchises. It is not in a large franchises. I stand to be corrected on this. Please, if you are the head of a large franchise, and you feel this isn't true, get in touch, because that would be a lovely conversation. Large franchises do not want to educate their ADIs or PDIs coming in about the wider industry and what's available, because they'll lose them. And, they treat them like mushrooms. And I would love for one of the big franchises to show me how they tell all of their trainees and newly qualified ADIs that they should be part of a national association, and these are the national associations that they should reach out to trainers, and here's a list of trainers that they'd love you to work with and improve yourself. Because I've never come across it, and I think there's a reason for that.
Look at who won the Intelligent Instructor Awards for Best Training Provider. It's the National Driving Schools.
Yeah.
Which is because the the franchisees at National Driving School will be voting for the people that trained them, which is part of the National Driving School. So read into that what you will. I don't want to go too into the reads with that, but I think part of it, maybe like you said, you're not as well known. I think part of it is and I think this is a good thing, genuinely. I think the growing number of people that are more prominent in our industry, the growing number of trainers, because there are some really, really good ones. And I think that's a good thing. I think potentially the negative is the number of people that sell standards track training, because that is by no means what you promote yourself as. Now you do, and it's part of what you do, and you're really good at it, but that's not what you advertise. So you don't advertise a shiny object for the magpies or crows that want to come and get it. And that's not meant as a criticism for anyone that does. But that is the negative of, I think, more trainers coming in and becoming more prominent and doing more lives and Zooms and Facebook Lives, stuff like that. And again, no criticism towards them, but it's a negative of more people doing that. It's that someone like yourself isn't as well known, but you are getting more of a niche market and creating better instructors as a result of that.
But I also think, and we probably both sit in this camp, that those people that do know, have come across us and know what we do or what we stand for, assume that everyone else knows. And there's an assumption that if you listen to the Instructor podcast, surely everybody's heard of it. And that if they're not listening, it's a choice. And maybe to quote Seth Godin from Purple Cow, awesome marketing book, we need more re-sneezers. We need people to kind of, stick a post out. If you hear something awesome on the podcast, stick a post out saying, listen to this today, put a little quote up there and put a link to it, and try and do that a bit more, because the more people that know Terry, the more that Terry can do.
Yes, please, by the way. But here's my example to this, and I've spoke about this a bit recently, so I hope I'm not repeating myself too much, but if you're becoming a standards check trainer, if that's what you're becoming, full power to you. I was good as Bob Morton. No? Then why would I come to you for standards check training? Why wouldn't I just go to Bob Morton? What are you offering me that's different? Well, I'm not saying you're not as good as Bob Morton, Chris, but you don't pretend to be. You promote something different to that. And that is why I would come to, I'm not going to go too far down this road because I'll get myself confused, but that's how I view it. What's different about you? What's unique? But, we'll touch back on that later on, actually. Sorry, go on.
So I was going to say it's the same, so that people can understand it. It's the same problem that you have as a driving instructor. Is there's another instructor down the road, and especially at the moment where people are phoning to find the one that's free, they're not necessarily phoning for you or for something specific. They're looking for a gap. But if we go back to when there wasn't as much out there work-wise, what do you stand on? What makes you stand out? Are all driving instructors the same? I bet you're saying no. And don't be the person who stands on, I'm patient. It doesn't mean anything in this job. I'm patient, nice person. I have fun lessons. Yeah, but what are you standing on? What does that mean? How do you differentiate yourself? What people have moved away from USP, which I'm really glad about because I hate it. But it's having that thing of standing out. We want the same with trainers. We want trainers to stand up and go, because of this, this is the platform that I'm, this is what I'm good at. I'm really good to give you mine. I'm really good at taking complex stuff, making it so simple that everyone thinks that they could have come up with it themselves, and then delivering it in a way that you can take it away and use it straight away. That's it's how my brain works. I have to do simple, so I take the stuff and I simplify it. And I've proven numerous times I'm really good at that, of taking it and simplifying it down. Doesn't mean other people can't do it as well. But if you want it where it's been overthought because I think too much and then simplified down, yeah, come to me. If you want that simple approach, and I can do that as part of a discussion. It doesn't have to be stuff that my model that I'm trying to sell you. Bring what you're struggling with, and I can solve that. That's what I stand on. I know Bob will happily tell you where he stands apart from the rest. Maybe that's what we should ask of people is doing that.
Anyway, you are listening to the Instructor Podcast Green Room, and this is part of the Instructor Podcast Network, which is essentially the Instructor Podcast, which you are listening to now. You're on that feed. However, there are some additional podcasts you can check out. There is Driving Instructors to Vision Zero, which is bringing relevant road safety content to instructors to help you reduce the number of fatalities that occur on UK roads. There is also the 1 Minute Driving Instructor Tips podcast, which does exactly what it says on the tin. And there is the Instructor Podcast Premium, where from as little as £10 plus VAT a month, you can get literally hundreds of hours of training. And if you're wondering what's available in that training, well, it's stuff that other people don't necessarily bring you. It's the eclectic mix that will help you become a better ADI and run a better driving school, including some new shows that have come on since the last Green Room. First up, we had Tom Stenson that came on. We're talking about how to discover when to develop, and his next show is then how to develop that thing. And the name of Tom Stenson's show, which I'm very proud of, is Tom Morrow's Lessons. Do you get it? Do you know that one, Chris? Because he's laughing. We also have Ray Seagrave, who's come along, which is, and this is what I like to do over the Instructor Podcast Premium. We like to make things a bit different, so every show feels different. Ray's show was a combination of conversation, Q&A, and presentation. Really love the record, looking at driving skills versus behaviours. And Ray's show is called Ray's Ways. I like that one. Nice and simple and effective. Then we've got Terry's Top Fives. And this is where a guest comes on. The first guest was Becky Seaton, who chose the topic of 5 ways to bounce back from a standards check or part 3 fail. That was a great recording. And just today, I recorded with Sam Harper, and I think this has a potential to be one of my best ever episodes I've recorded on anything ever. Sam had the idea of top 5 inspirational quotes. So of course, I made 5 quotes. Sam brought 17. But it was wonderful dissecting all that. And we actually spoke quite in detail about what you just spoke about, Chris, about making yourself unique and stand out. And it's quite interesting listening to Sam's response as I went through something. So that's available in premium this Thursday, the 1st. And then lastly, one of the new shows we had was with your good self, Chris. You joined us to talk all things fairy, and the title for that show was Chris's Theory of Everything, which I also So all that new stuff is available for as little as £10 plus VAT a month, as well as the other literally hundreds of hours of access to training you will get there. And there is more coming. I realise that is a big old plug, but it's my show and I've been away for 2 months, so deal with it. But moving on nicely, let's talk about what's coming up over the next few months, because there are a few events coming up. Not as many as I thought there were, but a few significant things. So first of all, August is Road Victims Month. Now, this is run by Road Peace, and it is done to honour the 500,000 plus people that have died on UK roads since 1927. So that's over 500,000 people that have died on UK roads in the last century, basically, which is quite a lot. It's still the biggest killer of young people. And what's the phrase I heard someone use recently that I say liked, that's the wrong word, but it was the biggest killer of young girls is young boys, and it's all around driving. So Road Victims Awareness Month is also championing the work that the emergency services do, because I think we often forget about them in this process. I know I do, because it might be the families that obviously lose loved ones and stuff like that, but it's the emergency service that are dealing with that every day. So it's championing that, and it's also raising awareness. So that's for August. And just before I throw over for your thoughts on that, Chris, I'm going to say one thing, and this is going to be maybe slightly challenging to some people, but whatever. You now know that August is Road Victim Awareness Month. As a driving instructor, you now have two choices. You can either do something to promote that. Now, that could be anything. It could be sharing road peace posts that they put out, or it could be raising money for road peace or anywhere in between. You now have, that is one thing you could do. Or you can do nothing. They're literally the choices. You either do nothing or you do something. And I think it's important to take a moment to reflect and think, what type of driving instructor are you? And if you don't like that reflection, that's down to you. I'm just throwing it your way. So, Chris, I suppose, first of all, what are your thoughts on Road Victims Month in August? And secondly, potentially your thoughts on the slightly provocative comment I've just made?
I think it's a really difficult one, isn't it? Because when you promote road safety, you want to be about the survival, and it makes it really difficult to engage with the opposite, the failure, because that's what it is, isn't it? It's something has failed, and when you want to have, we don't put test fails up on social media. We celebrate the passes. It's that same kind of thing. You've got your nice shiny company and you're looking at all of those positives and everything else. That's quite a difficult choice. I know you said you can do one or the other. Don't think it's an easy choice. So I respect that difficult choice. I would love to see other people's ideas of how to deliver something that is a something, not a nothing. And how they can celebrate, if that's the right word, the month in a way that is, acknowledging what it's there for, but also trying to stay positive inside of what we do and what we're working towards. You could look at the improvements that we've made, because there's lots. The figures are better, but Vision Zero, exactly that. So I think it's a really interesting one, and I look forward to seeing whether we can find some champions of that. But I respect the challenge of doing so, and I think if you're able to come up with something, then make sure you let us know and we can shout about it. Let's not let it go unnoticed when people do something in that way, because that's not easy.
I would say he started off by saying that we don't talk about fails. Some of my most successful posts have been talking about the fails on my driving school. Literally, they've provoked the most conversation, and look, I've stopped doing it. I've been honest enough over the past year or so to admit that my driving school social media is shit right now. It's getting better, but it's still not where I want it to be. But in the past, I've spoke about it, and some of the best things, and I always check with a student, and I never name the student in the post. I just say, is it okay if I write about this? And they say, yeah. And there's been great feedback, and there's been times the students come on and commented and said, yeah, I learned this and I learned this, and so much more provocative and engaging than so-and-so past. And we probably should start getting back to doing that, although that then implies that I want people to fail. But the other thing I would say is, let's use this example. And look, everyone's going to have different ideas, but Norman's driving school, for example, Norman's driving school wants to join in with Road Peace in talking about honouring the people that have died in the past. However, we want this number to come down. We don't want 5 people a day to die. Here's how. And you could write 30 points. You don't have to be 30 just because of 30 days. Hold on. How many? I'm going to do the rhyme. 30 days, September, 31 days. Yeah, 31. In August. 31 points, for example. Or you could do one every Monday throughout the thing and say, this is how we at Norman's driving school are going to reduce the number of people down the road. This is how we create safe drivers. It doesn't have to be talking about people that have died. Yes, it ties in with that. But as I've said, it's also celebrating, again, wrong word, the emergency services. You could, at that, why not get to your local fire station? If you're someone that likes doing videos, why not get to your local fire station and say, can we have a chat? Can we record a video about this? It doesn't have to be the negative side. It doesn't have to be, how did you deal with this thing of this person dying in your arms. Doesn't have to be that. It could be, what tips would you give for anyone that's just passed a driving test as someone that deals with the negative side of it, and see what they say. There's a whole wealth, and I love what you said about you looking forward to seeing what people come up with. But when I say you can either do something or nothing, that's non-judgmental by me. That's that's the reflection on the person listening. And if you feel uncomfortable, as not you, Chris, but if someone listening feels uncomfortable with that question, that's I suppose more on them. But I think you're right. Maybe it's more difficult than I'm giving it credit for. But I just think there are ways to do that are relatively simple, even if it's just sharing road pieces posts. That will take you literally a minute a day, and you could do one a week. And you are supporting that campaign by getting road piece seen by more people. Or if you don't want to do it publicly, maybe you could donate £1 from every lesson you do, or 50p from every lesson you do to road piece that month. And you donate 50 quid to them or whatever. And they would be ridiculously grateful for that. I know that. So I'm not necessarily encouraging people to do it. I'm just throwing the choice out there. And I'm intrigued to see who does and what they do, and whether I can be doing stuff in my driving school as well as the instructor podcast stuff.
Yeah, sounds awesome.
So, but that is August, and I'm. Do you know what? I'm looking forward to seeing what road piece I've actually got lined up, and I should actually tag on there that if you go to the website roadpiece.org, I think that's right. They've got a whole section with like different social media stuff that you can use and different ideas that you can do. They've got some links that you can upload directly to Canva, so you can upload their templates and stuff like that. I'll put that in the show notes, so there's stuff there that you can utilize as well. Fast forward into September. On September 29th is the ADI, NJC and Intelligent Instructor Expo. And I'm not sure if I'm attending this year, but do not let that put you off going. Even if I'm not there, I'm sure it'll be a reasonable event at least. But it is bigger and better than ever. They've announced that the main stage is basically getting its own venue. And I was looking at some of the main stage offerings. It's like Bob Morton, Ray Seagrave, Tom Stenson. I think Stuart Locker was on there. So basically, the main stage is the Instructor Podcast Premium. Just, throwing that out there, £10 a month, whatever. But they are really, really pushing the number of speakers, which on one hand is great. Also means you've got to choose from more people and people will drop out. But it looks like it's going to be bigger and better than ever. So, that's September the 29th. We'll probably talk about that more next month. But any initial thoughts on that, Chris?
If you come and see me, because I will be there and I am speaking, please come and tell me your name when you first start talking to me, because otherwise there's that awkward moment when I'm trying to remember who you are. And people did really well last time of just walking up, saying their name, and then we carried on a lovely conversation. I'm looking forward to it. I think, it's such a growing part of the industry still, and there's different faces every time, and a different mix of people of where they are in the job. If the industry is growing so much so that they can have more people speaking, and I know they've made an extra effort to make it different stuff as well, because some of us stupidly went, yes, we can do different, and gave them a concept, and are now struggling to figure out quite how that what that's going to be. But it'll be brilliant once it's there, I'm sure. I think that's a really good reflection of what's going on. So let's see what marks out of 10 we can give it on the day.
Free as well, just a reminder for anyone, it's a free event. You don't have to pay out. Obviously, you take a day off work and potentially travel, but the event itself is free. Also, just want to mention there's a lot of webinars coming up that aren't run by our industry, but they're run from people in the road safety sector. I will be sharing them as and when I get the full details. The usual place I put them is in the Instructor Podcast WhatsApp channel, so make sure I go and follow that. You can find the links that in the show notes. Unfortunately, some of the communication by the road safety sector is about as good as some of the communication in the driving instructor sector. But there you go, you live and learn. However, as we were just speaking about at that ADI, NJC and Intelligent Instructor Expo, there'll be lots of experts delivering conversation and topics and presentations there, which brings us nicely onto the thing that you wanted to speak about, Chris, because I got a message from you a few weeks ago saying, on the green room, can we talk about experts and expertise and that kind of stuff? So, as always, whenever you put a suggestion forward, I jump at the opportunity of not have to think as much. So, why experts? What's on your mind here?
Firstly, it always takes me back to when you started referring to me as an expert of roundabouts, and it upset so many people. One silly little word, and it really did provoke, so many responses. And it's a word that I've always hated because I was always told that an expert was X is something that's defunct or out of date, and a spurt is a drip under pressure. So it's a phrase that I've always kind of tried to shy away from. And then it made me wonder whether we should be embracing it more. Of actually, maybe people are responding in that way because there's, we don't want to be seen as an expert. We're sort of seeing as it's a bit like profit. People have a funny response to making money as a business because that's what we do. We've got a business. And I think that's one that other people have to struggle with. But as you've said a few times today, there's a growing number, and this isn't a criticism of anybody. We have to say that bit, don't we? Because otherwise people get upset and they assume that I'm talking about them, and I'm really not. There's a growing number of big names in the industry, whether they're big just in Facebook or whether they're big in a certain niche. I'm really interested in what puts you there. Is it just someone who had a good idea? And in business, that tends to be what happens, isn't it? Someone's got a concept or a good idea, they become an expert on that, so they prove themselves in their field. We're all in the same field in a lot of ways. So I just find it an interesting concept. Who decides that you're the expert? And I suppose it was a bit of reflection on myself. And I thoroughly appreciative and genuinely, I can't express how much I appreciate the support of people regarding theory. I am working my backside off to make sure that I know everything that I can know about theory and I understand it, and then trying to get change happening. Not for any instructors particularly, but for the people that I speak to, my customers that are suffering, and the suffering's real. That's what motivates me, and I'm a geek. I love it. Instructors don't have to kind of then buy into that and recognize it, and they do, and it's unusual for a theory post to end up on Facebook where people aren't tagging me in it. Which I genuinely love that. So, and Graham Hooper did a video this morning in which he name checked me in that, and so to be in that kind of position, which clearly just means no one else is really doing it. It's myself and Annie Winterburn that tends to be the two that get mentioned about theory, depending on who's mentioning it. That what is it? Is it just a quantity thing? Is it just that someone's standing out as being different in a niche? Where do we decide someone's an expert, and should we all be experts?
You said two different things there, and I think they're interesting because earlier on you referred to as what makes someone the expert, and then just then you said what makes someone an expert.
Yeah.
And to me, they're two different things because the expert implies knows more than anyone else. And I think it's when you look at the term expert as what it means. I don't think we need to know more than anyone else. I think we need to know a large amount. And it's the example I use now. I've spoken about this before. I think I always explain this poorly. So hopefully I can explain it better this time. I never want to be the smartest person on a podcast about the topic we're talking about, ever. Because otherwise, what's the point of having the guests there? If I want to talk about coaching, I want someone like Bob Morton on, because Bob Morton knows more about me and he's got more experience about coaching than I have. So therefore, I can play the role of the listener and I can ask those questions. I don't have to be an expert. I have to be the person asking the questions. In the same with this now. Now, this the green room is slightly different. It's more kind of opinion based. It's talking about news, but even with this, part of the reason why you're on is because, in my humble opinion, you know more about the industry as a whole than anyone else. I can ask your opinion, and you can come up with all kinds of stuff from pretty much any element of our industry, and that's part of the reason why you're on, other than your good looks and witty charm and banter. And so when we're talking experts, it's all relevant. I've got a student at the minute, and trying to get him to answer questions is really difficult in the way of like knowledge questions. I want to find out if he knows something. It's really difficult. He just says, I don't know. And I know there's all thing, all this smart, but all this stuff. But we've been through all that and he's no interest in it. The one thing I've found that works for him is when I say, what advice would you give to someone? So what advice would you give to someone about mini roundabouts if they'd come to you before? And he then takes the role of an expert and starts giving advice. And he's really good and he knows his shit. And it's like, why don't you just say that when I ask what, but he's then taking the role of an expert. So in terms of how do we define an expert, to me, it's purely someone who knows a lot about a specific subject.
Is it knowing more than someone else?
To a degree, because you could do that expert session on roundabouts, and there could be some people that come along that potentially know everything you've said. That doesn't mean it's not been a good session. And I've said this before, and I haven't said it for a while, so I might butcher this, but I want to learn something new, or I want to get a different opinion or a different way of doing it, or I want to be reassured I'm doing it right. Now, if I come to you and you just say everything exactly the same as I'm doing it, I'd still class you as an expert, but I'd maybe class you as the same level expert as me. But I still feel better because I'm like, all right, okay, yeah, so Chrissy's doing that and I value his opinion, so therefore I must be doing all right. It doesn't always have to be I'm an expert and therefore I know more than you. Now, like I said, there's situations that change, like on a driving lesson. It's kind of helpful if we know more than the students in terms of knowledge. Like on podcasts, it's helpful if the guest knows more than me because then I can probe their brains. But I think where it can become a problem is when you've got someone who, oh God, I'm struggling to phrase this. When you've got someone who professes to be an expert, but isn't, or professes to, actually, no, this is where I'm going, professes to be an expert, but then looks down on people who aren't on their level. I think that's where it becomes a problem. Even if you're maybe not as quite as high on the expert level as you think you are, but you're talking down to people and belittling them because they don't know, I think that's where the bigger problem comes. I think the word expert is, as you said, it goes back to the expert session we did. And I still do the expert sessions. And I'll go and think, who's an expert on this subject I can get on that potentially knows a bit more than me, or will just do a better job of presenting it than me. And that's it.
Yeah. No, I say, I was just very interested in how that sits inside of our industry where, yeah, thank you. It's that difference between expert and specialist, and that we specialize as instructors. We have a specialism. You don't have to be an expert to be a specialist. You can have a working knowledge. You can know enough. And I think then when you start finding that expertise is a different thing, and that's probably where I come at it from.
Here's an example I'm going to give, and I'm going to be very, very careful not to give the game away with this one. But we had a conversation recently, Chris, where you kind of asked me on to do something, and I said no because I think that's something I would be better at asking the questions at than giving a thoughts and opinions on. I think that's where the problem lies. I'm in control of my ego enough to say, I'm not going to be as good as some other people that, and I recommended other people to you. I think there's people that aren't in control of their ego enough. Now, that doesn't mean I don't believe in myself or anything like that. It's knowing where I sit and thinking, okay, I'm better at this. I think someone think I'm better in this situation. And I think that is part of where the problem lies. And I think that sometimes, I'll go back to what I was saying before, if you're a standard check trainer and all you do, no offense intended, all you do is teach the standards check, then fine, do that. You don't have to put yourself in this niche category. Just be aware that you will be compared to other standards check trainers. Whereas if you put yourself in that niche category, and I'm not going to name any, but you put yourself in that niche category, then you've less chance of being compared or more chance of someone going, oh, actually, that's the thing I want, that thing there. I don't just want to learn about the competencies. I want help in this area with it as well. And I think that there's not enough people that are in control of their ego enough to say, actually, someone else will be better, and I'd recommend this person.
Yes. Yeah. And again, it goes down to that knowing what you stand for, and it comes down to that, and being able to back it up as well. You've got to be. It's what's the phrase? It's not good enough to be on the next page of the book. You've got to know the book. So you can't just be out there one step ahead of other people. Yeah.
I'm going to use one last example of myself with what I do at the Instructor Podcast Premium. And that's not plugging it. It's the best example I've got, although www.theinstructorpodcast.com. But I really, really selective over what I do on there. So I do a lot of solo content on there as well. But it's like, if I sit there and think, actually, someone else can do this better than me, I'll get them to come and do an expert session. I'll get them to come on and start their own show, i.e., The Theory of Everything with Chris Bensted. And I can probably have a bigger input on that than I can with some other stuff because I'm relatively knowledgeable at the theory, probably more than most instructors, but still behind you. And this is how I view it when I'm doing the podcast, still behind you. So therefore, I'll get someone on that knows more than me. But for example, I'm creating a series at the minute around the SAFE system and how we can implement the SAFE system into driving lessons. I don't think there's no instructor out there that can do that better than me. So therefore, I'm doing it. And I'm creating a series of presentations around it. And that's going to go out later this year in there. And that's how I work it out. It's purely what can someone else do better than me? And then it's also a case of, do I need to get better at that thing? If someone else can do that better than me, do I need to get better at that thing or do I keep doing my thing? And I think that's a difficult thing to decipher. And I think the last thing I'll just chuck onto this, and that's anything you want to add, and you might want to after I've said this actually, but you won't know this, but you actually stopped me, or not personally, but you put me off doing the 5 Minute Theory podcast. Because when I started doing the 5 Minute Theory podcast, no one else was doing theory stuff, or good theory stuff at least. And it was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And then you've come out with theory test explain. It's like, all right, yeah, a 5 Minute Theory is like, this is how I viewed it, pales into insignificance. That was I'm like, oh, right, okay, yeah, there's no point doing it now, is there? And I kind of went off it for a bit. And then it's like, well, I came back to it because like, it's different.
Yeah,
that's what we're talking about. It's different. It's not more than. It's not less than. It's different. I used to get offended when people still do. My natural go-to get offended when people call me a content creator. It feels belittling to me. But what am I doing right now? I'm creating content. Every time you write a Facebook post, it's creating content. Anytime you do anything, it's creating content. And I think it's just how you view things. So yeah, and anything you want to touch on or wrap up on there, Chris?
I'm glad you said content creator because I did worry for a second. But yeah, no, I'm glad you're continuing to do bits of the 5 minute because I use it on my resources list. It's listed there because it's different and different people engage with it differently, and different is what I like to hang my hat on, and it's what I like to see from other people. I get bored when it's all the same. I want to see different. All your pupils are different, every single one of them. So let's find different. And yeah, I think that's for me, that's the thing that makes people stand out.
Well, let's move on to the new feature of the show, and we're going to give a positive shout out, Chris. We're going to give a positive shout out with the option of having a little rant as well if you want one. But who is is it a positive recommendation? Is it a shout out? Will you fire away? Who are you shouting out?
I want to go for a little bit of recognition to the DVSA, because we often don't. Greg Walsh, who is the new, I'm probably going to get the title wrong, but the head of the theory products, I think that's what they call it, who has not been in the job for more than a week, has reached out and said, can we have a chat and discuss pros and cons and problems and everything else about theory. No promises, but has recognised that there's a need to look at it, and has reached out to do so. So we often say that they're not listening, or they're not engaging. Yes, I also recognise that it's slightly self-serving because I get to have that conversation and everything else, but hopefully some good will come of it. And if people have got things that they want raised through those channels, get in touch. But it is appreciated, and he's an example. Other people I know. It was always the thing with John Sheridan was always, if you don't know who to talk to, get in touch with me and I'll help. And he's still hanging around. They haven't got rid of him totally yet. He's there. And it's the local test centre managers, LDTMs. That's what I was looking for. Set of letters. Don't like them. But if you've got a good one of those, your life is better. So yeah, we'll just take it as an acknowledgement in case any of them do listen. But even if they don't, that actually there's some really good people out there trying to do some really good work. And what we normally complain about is the system and not the individuals, except for some names that we won't list, because I'm being positive.
They do listen, and I did a little bit of digging recently just onto my email list, and there's a surprising number of @DVSA email addresses on the email list, which I find amazing and brilliant. But yeah, I wanted to give these shouts definite. But is there anything on a rant about?
I've got a real bee in my bonnet still. It's one of my things that's on it. I used to do a lesson with pupils where they had to come up with the 10 commandments of driving, and they didn't have to be serious things necessarily. But it was about them caring enough, recognizing their values. Really interesting stuff. And one of my examples was always Magic Tree air fresheners, but air fresheners specifically hanging from the rear view mirrors. That is an MOT failure, therefore it's illegal. And I have the unpopular opinion, I'm sure, that if your car turns up to a test and you've got an air freshener, that you shouldn't be taken out on test. It should be refused. Because they'd refuse your tyre if it was an MOT failure, or if there's a light on the dashboard. And there's some examiners that have them hanging from their rear views. And I just think it's such a small thing, but it says so much. So yes, I'm a massive pedant, and it is probably petty. I do support it with evidence, and it is solid evidence that if you look at any kind of psycho thriller film, the killer is always the one with a Magic Tree air freshener hanging from their rearview mirror. So I think that's supported of the fact they are evil. And if you then look at all the people that cut you up during the week, I bet that there's a air freshener hanging from their review. You watch, do a study for me over the next week. But I just think it's a lovely example of how we can take a little step to try and improve and be professional. And I think it fits in with the broken window studies, where if you've got an area, a residential area where there's a broken window, that spirals into the area falling apart, and you should fix that window because there's genuine evidence to show that. I think it's the same with ADI standards. Let's hold ourselves to account and at least make sure your car's legal, genuinely legal. And I don't care that, car wash companies hang them up for you.
See, I'm quite annoyed you carried on talking after you said cutting people up, because I had the perfect segue. Because I'm pretty sure that in the original Halloween, Michael Myers, when he stole the car when he escaped the insane asylum, had an air freshener hanging from the mirror.
Yeah, they got a franchise thing going on. Some kind of deal with Magic Tree specifically. But I include all air fresheners, whether it be a jelly bean, one of those other trees, whatever they're called, the oak ones, or just anything hanging. Fluffy dice. It's not just air fresheners. Anything that is hanging there. And the argument is, I don't see it. So there's a thing in your eye line that is moving around, and your brain's filtering it out. Muppet.
I'm going to come with my rant first, so I'll finish on the positive. And my rant is this. So the Instructor Podcast Facebook group is a segregation, a split, if you like, of driving instructors. It's dividing driving instructors. So people that come into the Instructor Podcast Facebook group should, in theory, be people that listen to the Instructor Podcast. That would make sense. I am dividing driving instructors, categorizing them in the same way a coaching Facebook group would divide them, because you would join a coaching Facebook group if you were interested in coaching. In the same way that your group, Chris, I'm a driving instructor and I'm on Facebook, splits up the entire world because you're categorizing driving instructors. I don't think that's a good thing, because then you've got little sub areas of the community you can go to for that applies to you. So that people listen to the Instructor Podcast and go and dive into the Instructor Podcast Facebook group in their little community, in their little part of the world, their niche that applies to them. In the same way it applies to the LGBTQ plus community. So if you're going to get on your high horse about an LGBTQ plus group, get on your high horse about an Instructor Podcast Facebook group. Get on your high horse about a driving instructor group. Get on your high horse about a coaching group or an empathetic, and I can't say that word, I've ruined my monologue, empathetic instructor group. Pathetic and irrelevant. Get a brain, get a spine, and stop being pathetic towards a minority group, such as the Instructor Podcast Facebook group listeners. That's my rant. Positive shout out is Rachel Butler. And this goes back over the past couple of months. For those that don't know, Rachel Butler has a role, or technically know what it is, the intelligent instructor, and she's just lovely and supportive of everything. And with stuff that went on around the what did you even call it? The convention that was recently held. She was really friendly with me, really helped getting me there because she knew I was going up alone, kind of set me with her and all that kind of stuff. And just a lovely person. And also with some of the stuff that's going on with recently, just really supportive, really helpful, checking in on me and just being generally nice. So she won't see this because she won't listen probably to the podcast, but definitely not all the way to the end. So if anyone does want to tell her about it, you're more than welcome. But yeah, I just wanted to give my positive shout out specifically to Rachel Butler. So with that being said, I'm getting off my high horse now. Is there anything else you want to mention today, Chris?
No, I think we've put the world to rights. Apologies for all of the adverts for me today. It just felt a little bit me heavy. Well, I'm sure you'll fix that in the future and just, slag me off about something. But it's always lovely to be here. I have missed it. So thank you. It's nice to have you back in my life.
There you go. A big thank you for you for joining. A big thank you for you guys for listening. In fact, I'll just take a moment to remind people, despite all the adverts, Chris, where they can find you.
One final one. Go to theditc.co.uk. Check out what the DITC has to offer and let us know what you need, because we normally know it, even if it's not currently on the website or such. We can point you in the right direction, which very often is Terry Cook. But get in touch to let us know what you need.
Just one final plug for anyone that's still listening, www.theinstructorpodcast.com. You can find all the information there about the Instructor Podcast Premium, where for as little as £10 per month plus VAT, you get access to hundreds, literally now, I've counted, it was a long day, hundreds of hours of exclusive training from people like Chris Bensted, Bob Morton, Sam Harper, Emma Cottington, Ray Seagrave, Lee Sperry, Lee Jowett, more that I can't remember. Laura Joyce, Adil Amazi, the greatest copywriter in the world. That's what his website's called. Adil Amazi, Chris Brooker, comedian, wrestling coach. Just amazing. All these people that are available exclusively for you to dive into now from as little as £10 per month. Or if you want to upgrade your CPD to £22 plus VAT a month, not only do you get all that, you also get all the expert sessions, as well as access to group Zoom coaching, and you get to come and watch us record live, much like we've got a few people doing today who I won't name because I don't want to embarrass them. But yeah, big thank you for joining me today, Chris. Big thank you for you guys for listening.
The Instructor Podcast with Terry Cook, talking with leaders, innovators, experts and game changers about what drives them.